All right, so in this lecture, we're going to talk about a problem that I see come up quite a bit with amateur artists, and that is having way too oversaturated images, okay? Now, a lot of times when we're painting something colorful, really want to have high saturation. It seems our instincts tell us that that's going to be the best option to have everything be as colorful as possible. Oftentimes, it doesn't really work out, and it looks pretty bad. So, I'm going to talk to you about what I call the saturation problem, how you can fix it, and how to go about making colorful images without blowing out all of your colors and making them fully saturated, okay? So you can see here, I have this image. It's just a quick sketch I did at the museum of an oviraptor, and then I added some quick colors behind it just to kind of rough out a quick painting, okay? So this oviraptor, when you look at it, it seems like a pretty colorful image, right? We see some purples going on. There's a little bit of blue in the neck in some places. We got greens, oranges, reds, yellow, greens, blue in the eye, right? It seems like it's pretty saturated, right? And it seems like a very colorful image. But if we color pick some of these spots, we'll see that there's only a few key points that really have a lot of saturation, and the rest of things kind of fall back in their place. So if we go to his crest on top of his head, we can see this is a bright yellow green. If we go to our color picker, you can see this little dot is all the way, almost all the way to full saturation, right? Our middle slider down here tells us how saturated it is, and this dot up here, the farther it is to the right, the more saturated it gets. And we can see it's almost all the way saturated, right? Let's look at maybe like the pink or red of his eye. So let's find a good spot here. Same with this color. It's pretty saturated. Okay, almost all the way to the right. However, if we come over here to the right and pick up, say, the purple on his back, that is far less saturated. In fact, it's almost gray, right? Yet, because of its relationship with the other colors around it, our eyes still perceive it as purple, okay? Let's look at the green here on his neck. Same with that. It's very middle, even a little bit to the left, and it still reads as a slight green color, okay? Now, the reason that we do this is because we want there to be a focal point. If everything is equally saturated, it's gonna be really hard for people to know what to look at, right? So while this image, even the background, we can color pick that as well and see very desaturated, almost gray. And even up here where it gets a little bit more saturated, it's still nowhere near as saturated as the actual oviraptor's focal point, which is his face, right? His face is where we have the most contrast with highlights as well as shadows. It's where we have the most saturation, right? Because we want everyone to look right there. That's where the detail is. That's where we want them to focus, okay? There's lots of shapes going on there, lots of line weight, okay? That's where we want people to look. We don't want people looking down here at the neck or in the background that much. That's just there to complement the focal point. Now, let's give an example of what this would look like if everything was full saturation. So here's an example with saturation turned all the way up on the whole image. And it's kind of overwhelming, right? It looks pretty amateurish. It's not very pleasing to look at. The background is distracting. It's so saturated that things almost seem blown out. Yet a lot of times I see people doing this, especially when they're trying to make something look really colorful. They put everything at full saturation. They use as many colors as they can think of, and it just doesn't end up looking very good, right? So your best bet is going to be find your focal point, decide what that is, and make that your most saturated point, okay? Have everything else, it can still be colorful, right? We could still see all these different colors here, and if you want it to be even a little bit more saturated than this, you can still do that, right? We can make it a little bit more saturated, we can pump it up, but if we go too far, it starts to look fake, it starts to look really bad, and we lose our focal point, right? So you want to use saturation as a tool, okay? Don't let saturation own you. You be in charge of it, right? Saturation is there to help you determine the focal point of your image along with value, so use that to your advantage. That's it for this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next one.